all had a lovely breakfast and all feel full up. And I think nearly everybody's back now, ready to start. So in a moment, we're going to welcome Rory, who's going to be interviewed up here, TV style, by Adrian, our pastor. And he's got a really exciting story. He's got 1 hour to share his story. And at the very end, I'll give you a few more notices about things that are coming up at church that you might want to come to. But without any further ado, really, I'm going to call out our pastor and Rory to come to the front and to settle down, ready for their interview. Thank you.
You've definitely got the more comfortable seat. I think you can spread out on that one. You know, you can spread out on that one. Well, I would echo what Sarah said about breakfast. It was a good breakfast, wasn't it?
Fantastic breakfast.
Great breakfast. Great breakfast. Rory, it's an absolute delight to have you with us today. We kind of started hatching this trip about a year ago. So we're thrilled to have you with us today. And I know you've got an amazing story to tell, and trying to sort of pack that story into 1 hour is a bit of a challenge, but we're going to do our best, aren't we, over the next little while. So I'm going to jump right in, really, by taking you back to kind of 1963 when you were born. You currently live in Johannesburg. You've got your wife Jill, 3 grown-up children. But we're going to go backwards for a few minutes to where you were born, and the kind of society that you grew up in. So you were born into an apartheid society, and I wonder if we could begin there by you telling us a little bit what it was like to grow up in that particular culture. What was it? Tell us a little bit what it was like. Well, we've got a few pictures on the screen which will just help us as we go along.
Play the pictures. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you. I've no idea why you would give up a perfectly good Saturday morning, a beautiful day. You can thank me for bringing the weather from Africa, okay? Thank me later. But I've had the 3 most beautiful, glorious days here in England with the weather, and it is a privilege to be here. So, what was it like growing up in apartheid South Africa? Well, there's the sign. So, there's racism everywhere in the world, including in this country, probably in every country, certainly in most. But only South Africa legislated that kind of racial division. And that's what apartheid is. It is a set of laws. So it's a Dutch word. The last 4 letters, the H-E-I-D of apartheid, is a suffix. So like we in English would say ness, goodness, kindness, apartness. That's all the word means, or separateness. So I see some nodding heads, so maybe I've enlightened some of you today. That's what it is, and it became an ideology, but it was a set of laws, iniquitous laws. I was born, as you correctly said, Adrian, in '63. Apartheid came to South Africa in 1948. Think back to just after the war. What should have happened is that Jan Smuts, who was Churchill's closest confidant during World War II, read the history books, it's there. He was a field marshal Jan Smuts, who was an Afrikaner who came to embrace the ideals that the Allies were fighting for, and he should have been our Prime Minister in that 1948 election. But almost in a Donald Trump-esque fashion, there was some very clever electioneering in the rural areas of my country, and the National Party won that election. And they came to power in '48 and established this system and this ideology called apartheid. So 15 years later, when I was born, it was up and running. It was flying, it was established. And what that meant was that I grew up in Cape Town for the first 7 years of my life. Folks, we have these wonderful African women in my country who work in our homes. Very often that's the only employment that they can find. Some of them would be educated, some of them would be semi-educated or semi-literate, and they live on our property. So right now, as I sit here in England, Esther, who works for my family and has worked for our family for 23 years, we've educated her children, and she has been like a second mother to my 3 boys. And that's the way life is. So very often the children of those domestic workers of ours live on our property too until they need to go to school. And then typically the mom stays in my case, in Johannesburg, and they send the children back to wherever they come from, and their grannies raise them and they go to school, and the employment they have pays for that. So you end up playing with the little black kid in your garden. But when you both get to the age of 6 and we need to go to school, well then I go to that school and he goes to that school. When I grew up, the white population of South Africa was 14%. 14, it's now 10%. But about the converse, about the other 86% of the education budget went to the white education, and black South Africans had to just put up with a really inferior, rubbish education. And sadly, that lingers to this day. Our education is in a dire mess in South Africa. So, what was it like growing up in apartheid? Well, I sadly have to admit to all of you that I grew up thinking that was normal. That was okay. And maybe I'm a bit slow or a bit stupid, a bit thick, because a lot of white South Africans realized faster than I did that that was anything but normal, and a lot of them resisted apartheid. I didn't. I ended up just going through school, carrying on as if that was normal and life was okay, and I joined the police force, which meant that we had to uphold those laws.
I was going to ask you that question. So you end up in the police force for 10 years?
17 and a half.
17 and a half years, so a long time. So, but you end up in a police force that's upholding the laws of apartheid. So how did that work for you? I mean, what was your view towards other races?
You know, I was a racist. I thought that it was fine that my race was considered to be superior to everybody else. We had tremendous privilege. I mean, the education I got was a fantastic government-sponsored education, but it was only for me and the other 14% of our people, and I thought that was fine. And it was, well, we'll get there, but it was Nelson Mandela that opened my eyes. But I thought that was okay, Adrian. I have to say it, I can't lie.
Yeah, well, it's an honest part of your story, really, and admitting to that as well. You've mentioned Mandela, and I know that lots of us are just dying to hear more about Nelson Mandela. So it was one of the connections that I made when I first came across your name. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. So Nelson Mandela was released, I think we got a picture on the screen in 1990.
Yes.
Now, not everybody may know, and obviously we've got people watching online as well, and perhaps those who are in a younger generation may not know why he was in prison and why he got released. Do you want just give us a little sort of quick summary of that?
Interestingly, if you look at that photograph, the man on the far left with the beard is now our president. That is Cyril Ramaphosa there on the left. And can you see the policeman's cap in the middle of the photograph with the badge on it? I mean, there was a white cop there even when he was released on the 11th of February 1990. Okay, so the most famous political prisoner walks out of prison on the 11th of February, and he was imprisoned there on Robben Island. The photo on the top left is the prisoners, the political prisoners actually doing hard labor. The hard labor that Mandela had to perform on the island actually destroyed his eyes, because they were sent to a limestone quarry where they had to knock out chunks of limestone, who knows why, and the glare and the reflection of the sun, because as you can see, it's an island in the middle of the Atlantic in Table Bay there, the sun destroyed his eyes. So part of our job later, when I served him as a bodyguard, we had to, if he came into, let's say, a black tie function, as he walks into the room, everybody wants a photograph. People are pulling out their cameras. We had to go and say, no flash. Is your flash off? Turn the flash off, because when a flash pops, our eyes, the pupil opens and then dilates, and he's never dilated. So it would stay open like this, and it was incredibly painful. Anyway, so he went to jail in 1964 because he was charged with high treason, sabotage, and a whole bunch of other crimes. And I don't know, because he never told me, but what I have gleaned just by reading and through general knowledge is that the party that Mandela was a member of, the African National Congress, was established in 1912. So long before apartheid came to power, to provide a forum or a voice for African people to express and realize, hopefully, their ideals, and to have a political say. And they were heard at that stage, to a very limited degree, but they were heard. We had just ceased to be a British colony. We became the Union of South Africa in 1910. ANC formed in 1912, became a republic in 61, and apartheid, as I said, came in 48. By the time 61 came and we were a republic, the African people had no voice. The government, the Afrikaner nationalist government, was not listening to the black people, and so they decided to form a liberation army called Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation, and Mandela was a part of that. And what they did was, in his case, they blew up things like electricity pylons and that kind of infrastructure. And for that, they were all charged, but they were charged with treason. It's very important to note, Adrian, that had he been convicted of treason, they would have hanged him in 1964. And again, I have to be honest, hold my hand up and say, I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
He was not convicted of treason. He was convicted of sabotage and sentenced to life imprisonment, starting on Robben Island. 27 years, think about that. I think there may be people here that are not even 27 years old. That's how long he spent in prison. He was not able to see his 2 daughters grow up. He was denied the opportunity to go to his own mother's funeral. It was just a complete, unjust, deprivation of the most basic of human rights.
And why was he released? What brought that about?
So he was released by the last white state president, F.W. de Klerk. By the way, they were both jointly awarded the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize for essentially liberating South Africa. But, you can argue this. It depends on your point of view. I'm not a politician, folks. Please understand that. But many people will say that de Klerk's hand was forced because the sporting, cultural, and political boycott and isolation of South Africa meant that we couldn't trade freely. Our interest rates were through the roof. The economy was in trouble. His hand was forced. Others will say he realized the unjustness of what his predecessors had done. I don't know. For whatever reason, he decides to make this earth-shattering announcement at the opening of Parliament 9 days earlier, the 2nd of February 1990. Please put that into context, folks. The Berlin Wall and communism ended in '89. In February of 1990, apartheid is abolished in South Africa. I mean, these were 2 momentous things in history. And for whatever reason, he announces in Parliament, I'm going to unban the ANC and all the other banned organizations, and I'm going to release Mr. Mandela and the political prisoners unconditionally. Massive announcement. And I'm sitting in my office. By this time, I've been recruited by the special branch of the South African police. And you're listening to politicians with a quarter of an ear. The TV's on in the tea room somewhere there, and somebody said, "What did he just say?" And he said,
Well, the question that's going on in my mind is so as a white policeman, having admitted what you believed then, what did you think about this release of Nelson Mandela?
Are you mad? What are you doing, And as he then signed that announcement into law, literally, he abolished all of this iniquitous legislation. We, as the special branch, had no more job. Because the banned people and the banned organizations that we focused on, and I want to say something in a second, so remind me if I go off at another tangent, but all of a sudden, all of that was legal. So they didn't know what to do with me as a very young, quite naive still lieutenant in the South African police force. They said, no, Stain, you go and start the VIP protection unit in Joburg. Because the business community and the diplomatic community, up until that point, wanted nothing to do with the National Party government. But once de Klerk made that announcement, they were flavor of the month, man. Everybody wanted a piece of them because they were trying to understand so that's the announcement, unban. Where is the strategy? What is the route going to look like going forward? Because, so they were all invited to black tie dinners and Chamber of Commerce meetings and, diplomatic briefings, and therefore, the cabinet ministers all required some form of protection at least, and I was told to start this VIP unit. But what I wanted to tell you, Adrian, and all of you, is that when I was recruited into the special branch, I was put in the churches section. And why, you may ask, did the security police have to have a churches section is a very good question. And there's a very good reason for it, because a lot of the anti-apartheid funding that was sent from Britain, from Scandinavia, from Holland and Germany, was channeled through the South African Council of Churches, which was an affiliate of the World Council of Churches. And that money was then disseminated in underground structures because they were all banned to fight apartheid. And why it was such a successful strategy was because the apartheid government, being good Protestant Calvinists themselves, would have been very reticent to, to lay an iron glove on the church, unlike Putin would, for example, or any other Marxist or communist leader.
So part of your job was to find out what was going on.
Part of our job. So they put me on this churches section. I'm completely green. My introduction is I get to meet the commander of this churches section. He says, go up to the 11th floor and go and fetch the tapes of the bugged telephones of the South African Council of Churches. And I put them on those old reel-to-reel tape recorders. I put some headphones on my head, and I was told to make notes of anything of a subversive nature that was in the phone calls I was listening to. And I could only understand about 30% of it, because the other 70% was in African languages, and I didn't speak any of those at the time. And the lady whose phone I listened to was a lady called Mary Mqadana, who was the secretary to the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. And we will come back to Mary in a second, but not in a second, in a little bit later in this tale of mine. Please remind me, you've all got license to put your hand up and say, Rory, remember Mary, because I forgot last time to tell you about Mary. But that was my job.
So it's a momentous change in your life.
Yes.
Your country's changing almost beyond recognition in front of you.
Yes.
You're not sure about what your job's going to be like anymore. And suddenly, you're in that place where Nelson Mandela's security detail and your security detail are getting to that place where you're going to have to think about working together.
Exactly.
We've got a clip that we want to show, actually, which I just love. I don't know if you've seen the film Invictus, but it's a superb film which captures a lot of the area of that we're talking about this morning, actually. But this particular clip just gives us a little insight as to what it was like for the black and the white security guards to think about working together, and Nelson Mandela's part in that. We'll talk about it in just a minute, but let's watch the clip first of all. We're getting there now. Here we go.
Thank you. Well, this is still morning.
Yeah. See, now, when you get a chance, can we get the schedule for the month?
Yeah.
We need to plan security.
Office of the President, good morning. Yes, sir. Will do. We'll have that ready for you.
We need more men.
Did you talk to Brenda about it?
Yes, yesterday. That must be Jesse with the schedule.
Come in, beautiful.
What's this?
Mr. Jason Chabalala.
That's me. Am I under arrest?
Captain Fader and team reporting for duty, sir.
What duty?
With a presidential bodyguard. We've been assigned to this office. Here are our orders. The special branch, right? You'll see that they've been signed.
Well, I don't care if they are signed. Just wait here. Sorry to disturb you, sir.
You look agitated, Jason.
Well, that's because there are 4 special branch cops in my office.
Oh, what did you do?
Nothing. But they say they are the presidential bodyguards and they have orders signed by you.
Yes. These men are special trained by SAS. They have lots of experience. They protected the clerk.
Yes, sir, but it doesn't mean that they have to come.
You asked for more men, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I asked...
When people see me in public, they see my bodyguards. You represent me directly. The Rainbow Nation starts here. Reconciliation starts here.
Reconciliation, sir.
Yes, reconciliation, Jason.
Comrade President, not long ago, these guys tried to kill us. Maybe even these 4 guys in my office tried and often succeeded.
Yes, I know. Forgiveness starts here too. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That is why it is such a powerful weapon. Please, Jason. Try.
Sorry to disturb you, sir.
Just a minute. 2 copies of the schedule.
Thank you, Jesse.
Jason, can we get rid of these guys now?
There's a schedule for the month. Let's look them over for assignments.
Right. What? Hey, Jason. I need to talk to you.
How can we trust them? We can't. That's what Mandela wants, okay? Let's go.
Are there any special orders or conditions?
No. Oh, yes. Mandela doesn't like it if you don't smile when you push people away.
Seriously? Yes, seriously. It's the new South Africa.
Madiba.
That's the president's clan name. That's what we call him.
We'll call him Mr. President.
Can we go through the schedule now? Can you gentlemen come closer?
Why university one saying like you're not?
Yeah, ask me that.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
What I want to know is how accurate is that sort of clip to capturing what it was like for you guys to work together?
It's as close to 100% accurate as you can get. It was exactly like that. I mean, think about it. I have to put myself in the shoes of the ANC protectors who have protected this man for 4 years since he came out of prison. And now they are asked to hand him over to a bunch of white cops. Never. I would never have done that. But at the very least, we had to find a way to work together. Adrian, it was this ludicrous. At that time, you had the president's motor car. This is in the presidential motorcade now. You had an ANC lead security vehicle, ANC follow security vehicle, white cops in the lead vehicle in front of the lead vehicle, and white cops in the follow vehicle behind the follow vehicle. It was that ridiculous. And then ultimately, we learned to know each other, and that takes time, because I cannot meet you today and trust you tomorrow.
Exactly.
Trust only comes with time.
Yeah.
And then we used to train together, work together, hurt together. You fall and slip on the shooting range and you graze yourself, and the blood that comes out there is the same color. Yes. And your wife also gets grumpy when you go to work late, and my kids also get sick, and that's how we found one another. Yeah. Nobody ever sat us down and said, we have to protect not just the person and the physical life of the president, but we've got to protect his ethos and everything he stands for. We just almost via osmosis absorbed that because of the power of his personality. Yeah. We learned that in a tacit manner because of the legacy of this great man. And remember, our black colleagues taught us to revere him as a grandfather.
I was going to ask you about that phrase, Mandela.
I'll explain that.
Yes, just tell us a little bit about that.
So he is a member of the Abatembu tribe, and the Tembus have a king. Now the Madiba clan within the Tembu tribe are the advisors to the king. So when you call a man Madiba, you are acknowledging his status amongst the tribe of the Tembus as the advisors to the king. So to say Madiba is not a term of endearment because it's a single name. It's like you're calling him by his first name. No, it's a term of respect. And we had to learn that from our black colleagues. So if he walked into a room, if he came in here and all of you were black, South Africans, and you didn't know him, automatically you would greet him as Madiba.
Right.
Yeah. But we were taught by our black protection colleagues to call him grandfather. Tata Omkulu is the Xhosa name for grandfather. Tata being father, Omkulu the great one. So we
it's a name of respect. It's a name of respect then, isn't it?
Yeah, so we called him grandfather. And he would tell us, sometimes when he got grumpy with us, he would remind us, you must remember that I am your grandfather. So don't argue with me.
I know that Mandela has had a profound impact on your life, and you're telling the story really well, because we're kind of getting that sense of where you're coming from in the story, your background, and you begin to see in that film clip what it's going to be like to work together with people that you've never worked together with before.
So let me just take half a second to go back to that photograph of when he was released, because I need to say, Adrian, that what happened when he walked out of prison with his fist in the air and holding his wife by the other hand is he went straight to the Grand Parade in Cape Town to make his first speech as a free man. And I'm not exaggerating, folks, when I tell you that the world's media were there hanging off every word he said, because we didn't even know what he looked like. Never mind, what is he going to say when he's released? Because it was a criminal offense to publish anything he said and his photograph under the Apartheid laws. So he goes to the Grand Parade and he says many things, but one of the statements he made, and he's quoting from a document called the Freedom Charter. You can Google Freedom Charter, 1955. And it says, South Africa is for all her people, both black and white. And this cynical white cop sitting in my office listening to this speech with more than half an ear now, are going, yeah, whatever. Of course you're going to say that. That's the party line. I didn't expect him to say any different. But the point is, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that I had any more place in South Africa, because the ANC had now come to power. They were going to sweep everything good and decent and white into the sea, and they were going to take over and establish some Marxist state or whatever it was.
And I guess that would be an expectation from quite a lot of people.
Yes,
exactly.
That's
what's going to happen, yeah.
And so now to come to the Mary story, see, I remembered. So when I started on the Presidential Protection Unit, that didn't happen until January of 96. He comes to power in 94. 96, I joined Jason Chabalala, who was in that clip. He's the team leader of the one team, and I'm the team leader of the other team. He's got a white cop as a second in command, and I've got a black ANC guy as my second in command. Wow. And Jason says to me, Rory, just go down to the union buildings and go and fetch the schedule for next week. So I walk into the PA's office. Guess who it is? The president's personal assistant was Miriam Kadana.
Wow.
And I introduced myself. I said to her, Mary, my name's Rory. I'm the new team leader. I've come to get the schedule. She said, would you like some tea while we print it? I said, I'd love some. And I sat down at her desk and I said, before we even start, I need to tell you something. I said, you were the secretary to Dr. Wolfram Kistner, the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, weren't you? She says, yes, I was. I said, Mary, I have to tell you, I bugged your phone. And that was my job as a security branch cop. And she threw back her head and she roared with laughter. And it was like, thank you, Mary. You know, she could have cursed me out of her office. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, only in South Africa can you even tell that story, guys. Yeah.
It's just such a fascinating story. But you start to work with Mandela. By this stage, you're obviously getting really close to this man, you know, as close as anybody probably. But what did you see about Mandela that started to change your mind? Because obviously your world is changing, and you know, you're not quite sure where it's going next.
Adrian, there was one singular moment that I will remember for the rest of my life, because it happened on the 10th of May, 1994. That was the day that Mandela was sworn in as president. So our first democratic elections were the 27th of April, 94. 10th of May, he is inaugurated. And again, just believe me, the world's big shots came to South Africa to witness that inauguration, including the late Duke of Edinburgh, representing Her Majesty. And my job as the commander of the police VIP unit and that of my men and women who served under me, was to protect the 13 five-star hotels that all these 184 VIPs were staying in. And they had to get into motorcades and get going up the M2 highway, 60 kilometers north of Joburg is Pretoria, the capital city, and we had to get them moving to arrive in reverse order of their list of presidents. Do you know that there's a pecking order for presidents? Guess who's at the top? All the dictators, man. So you've got Gaddafi and Castro and Robert Mugabe and the like, who are number 1, 2, and 3 on that, and they've got to arrive in reverse order. Now you try going to a dictator and telling him, sir, you need to leave now. You know, good luck with that. But somehow we got them into these 184 motorcades, and we moved them up the highway to the north, 40 miles north of Joburg is Pretoria. Beautiful, beautiful sandstone building designed by a British architect, Sir Herbert Baker, and it sits on a little hillock in Pretoria overlooking the jacaranda city, and it's called that because the grids of the city streets are all lined with jacarandas. Yes, they're Aussie trees, but we'll let them get away with that one. and beautiful gardens. And Adrian, there is a party, a celebration going on in the lawns of those buildings because black South Africans are celebrating the advent of freedom and democracy. And somebody very wise, I thank him every day, when I think back, on the inauguration committee decided that if we put 60,000 soccer fans, football fans, into Ellis Park Stadium, then that's 60,000 fewer people clogging up the M2 where I've got to move all these motorcades, and more importantly, there isn't even space for 6 people on those lawns. So put 60,000 into the stadium, televise the events from the inauguration, and you know, we've won ourselves some space. So I get a telex, not even a fax, guys, a telex, saying that the newly inaugurated president will attend a soccer match, a football match, at Ellis Park Stadium, literally half an hour after he swears the oath of office. I mean, who does that?
Not a lot of time to plan security then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we had to do. So I thought, listen, I'm still the commander of the VIP unit. I've got this telex. Nobody's told me any different. I better go. And I went to Ellis Park, took the sniffer dogs and made sure the president's suite was okay, posted my men and women, and awaited the arrival of the helicopter that landed next door, and then the motorcade would drive him around. In fact, we were in a reception hall much like this. It was a polished parquet wooden floor. And over there where those doors are was the vehicle ramp, and over here were the doors to the president's suite and the field of play beyond that, and the teams are now lined up on the field, waiting for him to come and greet them. So here comes the motorcade, drives in, it stops here, and the Football Association officials welcome him. He doesn't even go into the president's suite because he's late, not his fault. Straight to the lift, down to the dressing room level, and he walks out onto the field in front of 60,000 all-black football fans who have just watched their counterparts partying on the lawns of the union buildings, and here he appears in their midst, so the party just continues. And I, as the commander of the VIP protection unit, am asking myself, have you done enough? I've never worked with a predominantly black football crowd before, and I've certainly never worked with Mandela. And this is the day he became president. I'm thinking, man, I could lose my job on day 1 here, you know?
But you're beginning to realize kind of how he changes his mind and decides to do things sometimes at the last minute, aren't you?
So I'm sorry this is taking a while, Adrian, I'm waffling. So he greets the teams, he goes back into the tunnel, comes out the lift, and immediately apologizes to the Football Association. He says, guys, I've got to get back to Pretoria. I've got 184 VIPs waiting for me to host them for lunch. Please excuse me. They say, sure. He gets in the car, I take a step back, waiting for it to go to the helipad, literally and figuratively breathe a sigh of relief, and nothing happens. The car doesn't move. And we see him trying to get the door open. But he's just got in. And it's a 3.8-ton armored BMW. You don't just flick an elbow and the door opens, you know. So the team leader, the ANC team leader, calls the bodyguard in the car and says, hey, why does he want to get out? That guy says, I don't know, he hasn't said anything to me. So the team leader gives the door a good sharp tug, leans in and says to him, Tata, why do you want to get out? He doesn't say anything to the team leader. He gets out the way, President climbs back out the car, walks around the bonnet, and he starts heading to that vehicle ramp over there where he should be driving out to go to the chopper. And the only person standing there my friends, is a white apartheid-era police colonel in his blue uniform with his stars and castles on his shoulder and his scrambled egg on his cap. And his eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because the president is walking directly towards him. And he's got no idea why. And neither have we. We are like tagging along in his wake, about 10 or 12 of us, all cops and security people. We don't know why he's going there. And he stops in front of the colonel and he puts out his hand and says to him, "Colonel, I just want to tell you that today you have become our police too."
Wow.
He said, "I'm now the president of this country, but I want you to know that from today forward, there's no more you and us. You are our police."
Wow. He started that from the very beginning, didn't he? That sort of sense of, in the clip, that sense of reconciliation.
Well, exactly, Adrian. I mean, remember, this is the day he becomes president. The first day in office. He's literally sworn the oath of office about 45 minutes ago. And he starts this agenda of reconciling South Africa.
Because you say in your book, you're skeptical,
Totally.
and you're thinking, is this the real deal? Is this going to be how he will stay? And you become won over, don't you, eventually, as you watch?
So as I told you, I didn't believe what he said when he went to the Grand Parade. I expected to hear that, and I was very cynical. But if you'd smashed me on the nose that day in the stadium, I would have been less surprised by what I heard him say to my colleague, because it was the last thing I expected. I was only one rank lower. I was a lieutenant colonel in the South African police at the time, and I could not believe that. And Adrian, that colonel represented the system that pursued him, arrested him, convicted him, sentenced him to prison.
Wow.
And on the day he became president, he said that. It absolutely, think of any cliche. It took the wind out of my sails. It just changed. I started to question there and then, have you not been wrong in everything you've believed and been trained in? Because it was that big. And, by the way, 184 of the world's most important people in Pretoria can just wait 2 or 3 more minutes, because that colonel needs to hear this from me today. I mean, you can't teach that.
No, and that's the point. You can't teach that. And we've talked already over breakfast and beforehand about his kind of wisdom and his insight in terms of seeing opportunities and the potential to get that message across. And one of the things that we do want to talk about is that famous rugby match that,
of course,
in 1995, which when South Africa won the World Cup. But we're going to watch another clip, actually, because I think the clip in many ways sort of tells the story and sets the scene of this rugby match. But this is a very powerful and symbolic moment, which we'll talk about after we've seen the clip, Rory, if you like.
Sure.
And explain to us what's so symbolic and powerful about what Nelson Mandela did on that particular day. We'll chat about it in a minute, but let's just watch the clip first of all, because it in many ways sets the scene for what we want to talk about.
I never knew he was going to be there, and he just stood there and he had this aura and he just said good luck. That's just all he said. And then he turned around and there was this number 6 on his back, and that was me. He said, I was so emotional. I couldn't sing the anthem. I was just too emotional, too proud.
It's absolutely unbelievable. The crowd has gone mad.
You know, I was so tense. I kept on looking at my watch. When would the referee blew the whistle?
It comes to Strensky. Up goes the kick. Strensky. South Africa's dream is alive once more.
When he eventually blew the whistle, we just found Louis Mate and myself embracing.
But that's it. South Africa have won the World Cup.
I now call on our President, Mr. Mandela, to make the presentation of the William Webb Ellis Trophy to the captain of the winning team, Francois Pienaar.
There it is. Francois Pienaar. Nelson Mandela is cheering along with the whole of the stadium.
but watching that clip, I find that really very moving and very powerful, not just because I particularly like rugby, which I do, but tell us a little bit of the story around that particular moment, because it's very powerful and very significant, isn't it?
Well, it is, Adrian, and it's illustrative again of a piece of absolute genius on behalf of Madiba, because the Springbok as a symbol had become a symbol of apartheid. It was not initially so, because black and white South African soldiers fought and died in World War I with the Springbok on their berets, black and white soldiers. But under apartheid, rugby as a sport became a kind of channel for Afrikaner dominance and superiority. And they defied the sporting boycott and invited rebel tours, and they even came here to the UK in 69 and 70 and had to have the tour abandoned. So it was an arrogance associated with the Springbok symbol, specifically with rugby. So the South African Sports Congress, after democracy, took a decision to abandon the Springbok. And rugby is the only sport where our national team plays under the Springbok. Our cricketers play under a protea, our men and women's hockey teams play under a protea, our Olympians have a protea on their, it's the national flower, on their chest. Only the Springbok remained because Mandela single-handedly stood up to the South African Congress of Sport and said, guys, we need to retain this symbol for rugby, because if we do that, the Afrikaner, it means so much to the Afrikaner that they will be susceptible to whatever it is that we're trying to do. And you know how he learnt that? He learnt that importance of that symbol by talking to his jailers on Robben Island, who were mostly Afrikaners, Boers. And he got to understand, in fact, he invited 3 of them to his inauguration on the 10th of May 1994, just before he flew to the stadium. That same stadium, by the way, that is a year and a month later. I'm talking about the 10th of May 94, he came to the soccer match. That was the 24th of June 1995. And he was spot on, because I struggle to tell this story, that we as white South Africans did not yet know the Madiba term. As I said, if you walked into a black environment, they would call him Madiba. We didn't know that yet. When he walked out onto that field to greet the teams before kickoff, and those white South African rugby supporters, predominantly Afrikaners, saw that number 6 on his back, they started to chant his name. Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. And I was going, what? I cannot be hearing this. And that's what happened. So one symbolic gesture, it never turned the Afrikaner into ANC supporters, don't get me wrong, but it certainly turned them into people that said, we'll give you a chance.
The point is, it's about reconciliation, isn't it? About Nelson Mandela seeing the opportunity and having the wisdom and the insight to do something like that. So he goes and he puts on one of the jerseys with the number 6. What's the significance of the 6? So
the significance of the 6 is that it was Francois Pienaar's, the captain, who he handed the World Cup to. It was his jersey, and that was his voice in the voiceover, by the way, in that clip. And he and his team didn't know that the president was going to do that. And he literally came and knocked on the dressing room door just before kickoff while they were in a team meeting, and he said, you know, I'd like to go and wish the team good luck. And when he walked in, that's what Francois was saying, he walked in, and when he turned around, they saw that he had this number 6 shirt on. And you know, if I weren't a Christian, I would probably believe in some sort of mysticism involved with this shirt, because Mandela was our first black president. We now have our first black Springbok captain. Guess what number he wears? You know, Siya Kolisi wears number 6. There's something about that shirt. Even, guys, sorry, but even Rassie Erasmus, the hated Rassie Erasmus played under number 6. You know, that number 6 shirt. Yeah.
We're getting some wonderful insights into this man. We're talking about the sort of public front, really. What was he like behind the scenes? There was a couple of lovely pictures which we saw a couple of minutes ago. I think I've passed them at this stage, but of him with your children and stuff. But what was he like? What kind of a man was he behind the scenes?
Do you know, Adrian, the greatest compliment that I can pay to Madiba is to tell you folks who have probably never met him that exactly how you perceive him with those kind eyes on a TV screen is exactly who he is. How rare is it to say that about a politician? That he's got this he had a unique ability to treat everybody exactly the same. He was utterly consistent, meaning how he spoke to another head of state is how he would speak to the gardener, or how he would speak to us, or how he would speak to his family. That is so rare, and especially so with a politician.
Precisely.
And he loved children. Oh my word! You know, if we were in any venue and there were kids around, so let's say he's in a meeting, and the protection team is outside with the vehicles, and we see there are kids, we know what's going to happen when he walks out. 100% he's not going to the car. He's going to the children. And he's going to probably sing with them, not to them, with them. He'll make a choir there, and he'll ask them, do you know Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? So we would go and brief them. We would send our men and women there, and we would tell them, listen, if the president comes out here and he sees you, he's going to come to you. We don't want you to all rush at him. We don't want you to jump on him. Just behave yourselves, and he will greet every single one of you, or shake your hand, and get ready to sing. We would tell them, we would prepare them. He loved children. Yeah.
It's easy, isn't it, to begin to idolize Mandela? I mean, obviously he wasn't a perfect man, was he?
No, he was not perfect. In fact, he's on record as saying, I am not a saint, and people should not treat me as if I were a saint. And he was, of course, he's quite right. He wasn't perfect, because none of us are. But he was pretty close to it. And, you know, he won me over on that day when I heard him say that to my colleague, the colonel. But it was more his behavior, Adrian.
Yeah.
One day we got back from, he got back from Cape Town, where our parliament is. He would go Monday to Friday to parliament, fly back home to be with his grandchildren in Joburg. Yeah, they lived with him. And he arrived early, like midday, and we thought, great stuff, midday Friday, take him home, say goodnight, and we've got an early weekend. Yeah, right, he calls me, Rare, man, I want to go to a hospital in Secunda, which is a mining town out to the east. I said, Dada, why do you want to go there? He says, because there's a girl there who has a terminal disease. And she had written to the Reach for a Dream Foundation, and somehow the letter got through all the gatekeepers, landed on his desk, and her expressed wish is dying is to meet the president. So he said, we've got time, let's go. Now, I'm now phoning frantically, mobilizing forces and cops. Get to the hospital, the president is coming. He walks in there, I don't know what it is with nurses. I don't know whether there's any nurses here. Forget the patients. They abandon everything, and they're dancing in the aisles of the hospital. They're singing. It's wonderful. And he spends, 20, 30 minutes with this girl, no hair on her head, 11-year-old little Afrikaner girl. Just catching up, hanging out with her. Yeah. Then he leaves her bed, and he goes to every single other bed in the pediatric ward and greets all the kids.
Wow.
And then we went home. We got home late, so who cares? It was a privilege to do that.
That's another really deep personal insight into the man, isn't it? You know, that you also tell another story about how he greets everybody in his administration when he sort of gets that's quite a powerful story.
That's a powerful story too. Thank you for reminding me, Adrian. So in that clip where you had the bumping of heads of the two teams of bodyguards, there's another clip which is actually quite well depicted, but not as well as what actually happened. I was not there, but I spoke to many people who were there. Because what had happened was all of the civil servants in the office of the president were white because they had served F.W. de Klerk as state president, and they're literally waiting for the axe to fall. They're waiting for them to be told they're fired, get out, move all the ANC people in, we're taking over, cheers, you know. And his chief of staff, as the Americans would call it, we call it a director general in the office of the president, Professor Gervil, heard this. He told Madiba said, call them. Put them in the cabinet room, I want to address them. So he walks into the cabinet room, all these white civil servants are there. Oh, here it comes. You know, the axe is about to fall, and he says to them, it has come to my attention that all of you are waiting for me to come in and get rid of you. He says, I'm here to tell you today that that is not the case. He said, we need you and your knowledge. Our people don't know how to run a modern democracy. If you see your way clear to work with me and my people, you will always have a job here. Wow. If you don't see your way clear, that's fine. Tell Professor Gerwel, you can leave, you'll get a pension. And Morgan Freeman then says in the movie, it's probably better that you do so right away. And no one moved. He cleared his diary, Adrian, and he spent the rest of the day going to every single office and introducing himself to the staff. And I spoke to a senior civil servant. She was a spinster, married to her job. One of those civil servants, she was in charge of the vehicles. And I needed a set of keys. And, you know, to try and get that car away from her was like trying to prize her personal property away. You know the type of civil servant I mean, good civil servant. Afrikaner lady, and she had this beautiful tea set out on her desk with the little crochet doilies and teapot warmers, like it's very common in Afrikaner culture, you know. And she said to me, her name was Mariki van der Westhuizen, I think. And she said to me, you know, Rory, I served P.W. Botha, F.W. de Klerk, and now I'm serving Nelson Mandela, and only Nelson Mandela walked into my office and asked me my name.
Wow, wow. That's just powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the greatest impact that he had on you?
Well, he fundamentally changed my view on race. Somebody that I considered to be a terrorist, somebody that I thought they should have hanged, ashamedly. That's what I thought and said, can't lie to you, shows me the greatest kindness. Because, Adrian, what happened when the intelligence services woke up to find out that this Lieutenant Colonel Steyn, who's a team leader of the President's Protection Detail, has got a special branch history with all of the stuff that unit was responsible for, some horrific human rights violations, not just spying on the church, you know. I get a call from my commander and says, hey, Rory, the intelligence services have picked this up. We need to let the president know. I said, of course you need to let the president know. Like, why are you only telling him now? You know? So I said, well, if he wants to fire me, I would like to be there so that I can at least say goodbye and thank you. So that he said, okay, you can come to the meeting, but you can't go in. So I was sitting on a wooden bench, not a lot smaller than this, outside the doors of the president's office, when in walked these 5 senior police and intelligence officials, closed the doors, and they told him whatever they told him. About 3 minutes later, the doors opened, out came the president leading this delegation back out, and he saw me sitting there. Yes, Rory, did you enjoy London? Because we had just come from the state visit to London in '96.
Right, yeah.
And I said, yes, that I enjoyed London, and then I knew that everything was okay.
Right.
And later that day he told me, you know, Rory, they wanted me to fire you. And I told him no.
Wow.
I said, you leave that boy there, he's doing a good job.
Wow.
And he said, we are not after the foot soldiers that were carrying out certain instructions. We want the people that gave those instructions. Leave him there. He defied them, essentially. Who was I, Adrian? I was utterly dispensable. I was just another white cop who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He could have said, okay, get rid of him. Cheers, Steyn. Thanks for coming. Next one in the door. But he didn't. Again, think of the foresight that took.
Exactly, it's the foresight, isn't it? But the impact that it had on you personally was profound as well.
So, sorry, that's the point, Adrian. You asked me how he changed me. Here's the thing, folks. In my role as the team leader of a protection team and as a police officer, remember I've sworn an oath, and my oath is to protect the head of state, irrespective of who the incumbent is. The role of the Presidential Protection Unit is to protect that office. Even if I didn't agree with his politics or hers or vote for him or her, that's not the point. I am duty-bound to protect him. So there is a tremendous amount of loyalty required from my team and me to do that job. And Hollywood is very quick to romanticize or, romanticize the notion of taking a bullet. You know, they'll say bodyguards are there to take a bullet for somebody. That's very easy to write in the script of a Hollywood movie. It's not so easy when it's your day job. And that was the day I realized, consciously realized that if called upon, I would actually be prepared to do that. Because that man was loyal to me long before I was ever called upon to be loyal to him. I was dispensable, and yet he defended me. He said, no, leave that boy there.
Yeah, wow. Powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
These last few minutes, you've touched on the fact that you're a Christian, and I'm interested to sort of know how that becomes part of your story too, because we started, didn't we, at the beginning of this interview about, you know, you were clearly part of a racist ideology in terms of how you grew up, and yet you've watched and you've experienced the power of reconciliation with Mandela firsthand. You've just illustrated that really powerfully for us, you know. When you became a Christian, that also was another big turning point in your life, and I'm just interested to know how that happened, and what was it about Jesus Christ that struck you?
So I come from a divorced family. My parents were divorced when I was 7 years old. We moved up from Cape Town to Joburg, and for whatever reason, they took us to Sunday school, but they didn't come in themselves. And then my dad got saved and came to know Jesus in that church when I was about 13. When I turned 18 and left school, I took a very unusual route to become a cop, because the police service force, as well as the rest of the government service, was the domain of the Afrikaner. It was almost sheltered employment for Afrikaans-speaking South Africans. And my dad, being a journalist, understood the cultural context much better than I did, because I'm English-speaking. And remember, we fought 2 Anglo-Boer wars. The British and the Boers, and I represent, to an Afrikaner, my home language is English, I represent you. I'm a Brit. So it's interesting, if I may digress for 30 seconds, that in South Africa, we will quite often ask a question of either directly to somebody or about somebody. So I'll say, hey Adrian, you know Sarah, is she English or Afrikaans? To you, if I say, are you English, it means were you born in England? No, in South Africa it means, what's your home language? Right. So if I say, is Sarah English or Afrikaans? You say, no, she's English. That doesn't mean she was born here. She means she speaks English as a home language, like I did. And my dad said to me, Rory, when you go to police college, you're going to be outnumbered. And he was 100% right. Because in Platoon 7 of Bravo Company, 1982, in the police college, there were 36 men, 18 beds down this wall of a bungalow, 18 beds down that wall. There were 4 of us who were English speaking. So we were fighting the Anglo-Boer War there again, and I was outnumbered badly, by the Boers. So my dad gave me a book by an English evangelist called John Blanchard. The book was called Living and Learning the Christian Life. And he said to me, my boy, just read some of this book each night. And as I said, I'd gone to that church. My dad became a Christian there. We went to catechism classes. I was confirmed. I went to the youth groups. But to be honest with you guys, I was dabbling and faffing around and messing around with Christianity. But one night, I remember it because I wrote the date in the margin of my Bible. I was reading Psalm 2 and it said, today I've become your father, today you've become your son. And I said, okay, God, okay, time to get serious about the claims you have on my life as my creator. And I invited Jesus as my savior in 1982. But I didn't meet Mandela until 1994. So in those 13 years in between, I was still dealing with a lot of messed up stuff in my heart. But he had changed at least, Jesus had changed me eternally, but Mandela changed at least the way that I looked at my fellow South Africans. Because how dare I, Adrian, look at somebody that Jesus shed his blood and died for and consider that person less worthy than me? I can't do that.
So what? Picking up on that question, what you say is the chief differences between how Mandela changed your life and how Jesus has changed your life?
Oh, what a great question.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So Nelson Mandela never claimed to be the sinless Son of God. He never claimed to be able to forgive sin. In fact, as I've told you, he said, I'm not a saint. So what that indirectly said to me, I am not a saint, says I too need a savior. Secondly, I was there on the 13th of December 2013 when he was buried. And the previous day, what a wonderful privilege we were given. We as the bodyguard were invited to the ceremony when his coffin was flown from Pretoria, where it had lain in state for 3 days at those same union buildings designed by Sir Herbert Baker. The body lay in state for 3 days. Any South African could come and pay their respects. And then it was put into the coffin was draped in a national flag and in an aircraft hangar at the Air Force Base before it was flown to the Eastern Cape where he was going to his last resting place. A sending off ceremony happened in this aircraft hangar where all the political elite, the who's who of South Africa were there, everybody dressed in black. And we were called up as the protection team, 10 at a time, to stand 5 on either side of that casket. Just left alone for 2 or 3 minutes with our thoughts and our memories. Tremendous privilege. And then it went into the aircraft, it flew down to Umtata, and the next day, the Sunday, I was again there, because this time I was working, and I saw that same coffin come out of the marquee where the funeral service was held, up a little 200-meter gentle slope, senior military personnel slow marching behind it. It's on a gun carriage, and it's going to the gravesite. And Adrian, the point is that that's where it is now. That body and that coffin are in the ground. But Jesus' tomb, folks, somewhere on a hillside outside Jerusalem, we don't know exactly where, is empty. We're about to celebrate Easter, aren't we? And what happened on that first Easter morning? Mary goes to the tomb because she saw him die on the cross on Good Friday. It could hardly have been good for her. She goes there to prepare the body, and she finds that the grave is open, the stone is rolled away, the grave clothes are folded up and lying on the rocky ledge there, and there's a bloke sitting there who she thinks is the gardener, and she says to him, "What have you done with my Lord?" And it's not the gardener, it's the resurrected Christ. And he says to her, "Mary, it is me, I have risen." And that's what we're going to sing on Sunday. Next Sunday, the 24th, I think, is Easter Sunday, isn't it?
A couple more to go.
Yeah, a couple more to go. So that's the second difference. Jesus' tomb is empty. Mandela's in the ground. And lastly, I'll say that absolutely he had a profound effect on me, and I hope I've done some justice to explaining that to you today. But that only lasts until I go into my hole in the ground. Because when I die, I can't tell you any of this anymore. But Jesus' change gets me right over the line and into eternity. And my brothers and sisters, I have to say to you, with every ounce of respect for you that I can muster, because I don't know you, it doesn't matter to me whether or not you believe in life after death. It's real. Because God tells us in His Word that it is destined for a man and a woman to die once and then face the judgment. And when we stand before our Creator, you stand by yourself, not with your spouse, not with your golfing or rugby or soccer club mates. You stand alone before God, and He says, "On what basis do you expect me to allow you into heaven with me?" And then it doesn't matter whether you're an Anglican, a Catholic, a Wesleyan, a Happy Clappy, or a whatever. The only answer is, "Lord, on the basis of what your Son did." That's the answer that gets you over the line, and that's what Jesus did for me. So the change that He made in my life is eternally more significant than even the change that Madiba made.
Well, it's been a fascinating interview, and we said we were going to try and squeeze this story into an hour. Do you know what? We've just about managed to do it.
Oh, wow.
And I know you've got so many more stories, and I'm sure if you're happy to stay around for a little bit, you can share some of those stories. And if you want to get Rory going, ask him about how they lost Nelson Mandela in Brixton on a visit to London at one stage, but you'll have to ask him that afterwards. I've got a final question, because we do like to kind of stick to the sort of times we say, and I know many of you probably got other commitments this morning, but a kind of final question to wrap up, really. Why would you encourage folks this morning to leave here thinking more about Jesus than Nelson Mandela? Obviously, we've heard so much about Nelson Mandela, and it's been a profound insight into his life. And I'm really grateful for you sharing your story. But obviously, Jesus has also had a profound impact in a different way.
Well, absolutely, Adrian. And it's a very easy question to answer, because people often say to me, "Oh, Rory, you were so privileged," and I was. I get that. What a wonderful man Nelson Mandela was. Wouldn't it be a shame if he weren't in heaven one day? No. Because you don't get to heaven, ladies and gentlemen, by living a good life. You don't get to heaven by reconciling a nation and forgiving racist cops like me and being kind to children. You get to heaven by what Jesus did. Remember, the Bible says that our good deeds, the Lord considers as filthy rags. So please don't ever think. That's why, don't get me wrong here now, I'm a Bible-believing Christian who loves Jesus, but I don't like religion much. Because if religion is a set of rules, eat that, don't eat this, eat that then, but not here, and follow these steps, I'm not interested in that. Because my relationship is with a person, and the person that my relationship is with is that bloke that Mary saw sitting, who she thought was the gardener. It's a real relationship with a living person, utterly unique in history. I mean, if you take the reconcilers, or the great people of the previous century, who would you say? Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Churchill. That's the list, really. Jesus Christ stands above all of them because he never sinned, and yet he died.
Yeah.
So that Nelson Mandela, you and me, can be in heaven with him. That's why Jesus is that important. He is if Mandela is a wonderful reconciler, Jesus Christ is the ultimate reconciler, because he gets us into eternity.
Yeah. Well, Rory, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you so much for an absolutely fascinating interview. So let's show our appreciation, shall we?
Thank you.
Well, in a moment we'll all be leaving, and when we do go, we're going to go out of this door and out this way. And there's a reason for that, because here's a table over here with a big poster of Rory, and underneath that table are some books. If you want to take one, there's a book called Who is Jesus and Why Jesus, and various other things just about the Easter story and about Jesus. But there's also an invitation to, I'll just pick it up, these little cards, an invitation to a Seeker Bible study, which is where you can look at the Bible yourself with other people and find out what you really think about Jesus. It's not telling you answers, it's giving you an opportunity to explore. So we're starting a group Seeker Bible study on Tuesday night this week. It'll be a taster session, so you can come and see if you like it or not. And it's going to be Tuesday night here at 7:30. So if you want to come to that, take one of these cards and you can put your name on my clipboard, because then I can get enough donuts or whatever as a bit of a snack to have with it. But do think about coming. Nelson Mandela said that he liked open-minded people, and it's important in life to be open-minded for Christians and people who are not yet Christians, or people who will never be a Christian, but to be able to explore things properly. So if you want to come, I'll be standing down there with Steve and Steve Frost, and we'll just put your names down if you want to come. There'll be no obligation to come again after the taster if you don't want to, but I think you will. There's also some invitations in the front of the seats for our Easter services, so you'll know what we're doing at Easter. But thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll come again to things. And it's time to go. So goodbye, everybody.